Welcome to this edition of the YAHOWAH blog. This is Chakmah, Choter, episode 7. We've had a couple of day hiatus from broadcasting, and maybe you notice as you look in the background that we have enhanced our library studio. Not only do you see the mother of pearl tiles in the shelves behind me to give it a much warmer look, a little more heavenly look, certainly a more islandly look with the mother of shell tiles all around, but we've added strip lighting as well to just give that backdrop a bit of depth, so that maybe it captures a more attractive image for the camera. We've also figured out some ways to get the camera a little further back to have a bit of a broader program. I have now set up a camera for Leah, a microphone, and lights. She's a little shy here, however, this evening, so we're not going to get her this evening. But we have set it all up now, so we are ready to go. So we have done some work to improve our set. Yesterday, I posted an interesting picture. It was a photo out of the 1970s. And what it showed is some people learning to type on IBM Correcting Selectrix typewriters. And I commented on it because one of the ways that I paid for college was I worked for IBM installing typewriters. Yeah, they were so sophisticated for the day and their electronics and their operating procedures that IBM had us dress up in suit and tie and go out to offices where these boxes had already been delivered. We unpacked them. We set them all up, got them working, make sure that everything was in proper order, and then provided tutorials to show the secretaries how to use them. This was, of course, way before word processing or computers or any of that sort of thing. And it just got me thinking about how we are in a very unique period of time. The last 2 days I've gone back and I've retranslated one of the most eye-opening prophecies pertaining to this mission that YAHOWAH has asked me to fulfill. And it happens to be the authentic Sermon on the Mount. It's when Solomon was dedicating the grand opening of YAHOWAH's home. It's all called the Bereth or Beeth, the home for YAHOWAH Shem, on the top of Mount Moriah. And as he did, he told Israel in the last days that they needed to be alert because there would be a Nakri, an observant foreigner. And it goes on to detail exactly who he is and how he would communicate to Israel. And one of the things says that his voice will literally be coming out of the sky. I mean, it's as if YAHOWAH recognized that we would be broadcasting this in a live stream format and beaming it up to satellites and back down to Earth. And I just thought about how just remarkable it is that this prophecy that could not have been fulfilled much before we are actually fulfilling it came to be. Because when I was in high school, that was back in the dark ages, I think they had developed electricity, but I had a manual typewriter. And I remember that to do my reports, and I love to do reports, always, yeah, always the same guy, right? You had to go to the library because you had to look stuff up in books. I don't know if you're familiar with those things, but they're like the ones behind me here. They're actual books that you could hold. And you had to go to a library, and then you had to use the Dewey Decimal System to go find your book. And once you found your book, and then you had to flip through pages back in the day, there was no, Control F, search and find. And once you found the citations that you thought would be appropriate, you came in with note cards. And you had to write on the note cards, either in print or in cursive. Cursive, something that they don't even teach anymore. But in print or cursive, and you had to write them on the note cards. So you'd have the quote right, and you had to document it in terms of the page number and the chapter book that it was presented in. Then you'd go back and you'd type it up with your typewriter. And if you made one mistake on a whole page, you had to go back and do the whole page again because, well, there wasn't anything possible to correct until IBM came up with the correcting selectrix. But they were so unbelievably expensive that only businesses could operate them. Just because I could install them and teach people how to use them didn't mean I could afford one. And that was college time anyway. So that was the state of the art. And my report then, I couldn't email it to the professor. You had to, I had to get on my bicycle, put it in my backpack, and you pedal your way to school. And everything was analog back in those days. So just think of how far we've come, because there is no way I could have written, it's now 38 books all total, 38 books using a manual typewriter. It wouldn't be possible. I couldn't do the research necessary. You think of the development of word processing and personal computers and the ability to have a computer program that has lexicons and interlinears that you can check, and that even has images of, things like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, while they were first found between 1950 and 1955, when I was born, they weren't published until, the first publication of them so that you could start using them happened to coincide with the time that I started working as the Nakri and as the Choter for Yahowah and his people. So just think of the coincidence of all of that. And then that got us to the point where we could start writing books, particularly with email, because I could send manuscripts to fact checkers and editors. And then lo and behold, there was an opportunity to do a short run publishing, because bookstores are pretty meaningless today. So you need short run publishing. There was Claritors came around about that time and became available. We used them. Amazon put them out of business, so we switched over to Amazon, and we use them for print to order. Very affordable pricing on paperbacks and hardbacks, but none of this existed previously. And with this many books, particularly since bookstores are non-existent essentially today, think of how marvelous that progress is. And then you realize there was, back in the time that I was in college, there was no internet, no computers, and no internet. And the internet gives us the opportunity to take those books and show them all around the world. And then it would be, fairly recently that social media would not only exist as it does, but allow you to live stream programs like this. So when Yahowah says, I want you to start talking to my people, get a camera, get some lights, and speak directly to them. That wasn't possible until really quite recently. And when we first began, we still were up against this brick wall of thought police, so that you couldn't tell the truth without being shut down. And wouldn't you know it, about 2 weeks after we started, Mark Zuckerberg says, I just can't do it anymore. It's wrong. And he fired and called off all of his thought police so that we could actually communicate here on Facebook. And now you have YouTube, where people can watch everything on their phones or their televisions, and Facebook, where we have a genuine community, and X, I guess there's X, a marketplace of rotten ideas. But, it's, thank God there's Facebook, because I tell you what, if the only way to reach people were to X, I think I would pull on a Moses on Yahowah and say, you're asking me to do something that just can't be done, or I would file for combat pay or something. But just the amazing development of all of these tools so that the prophecy, and we'll get to it because it's about 100 pages from where we are right now in our Chakmah Choter series, but we'll get to it and you'll see that the things that it predicted would occur are only possible now that we're in place to do these things. And beyond all of that, you just don't start. I've been at this now for 24 years. 24 years, every waking hour from before the sun rises to after the sun sets, over 100,000 hours getting prepared to be able to do this with you. And at the time that the preparation was completed, and for the first time, anyone knew the entire story from beginning to end. Everything that Yahweh wanted us to know from the garden to the garden was all manifest to us. And it was at that moment he said, let's go. And it was interesting. It was at that moment that we had reached that point that we had the publisher, webmaster, and social media manager all say, we're going to go and join a mommy goddess cult. And I said, good, because we're going to do things differently. And here we go. I mean, the timing, it's hard to say there was any coincidence, but it was a series of 1,000 things that had to go right just at the right moment. And they all did. So I wanted to share that with you as we got started today. So we're going to pick back up on what is the 14th mashal. A mashal is a word picture. It is, they were all written by David. He is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. He is the returning King. He is also our Savior. It is interesting that he wrote this mashal about me, about the job that I am doing for him as the Choter. It is one of only 2 places where the Choter is mentioned in the entirety of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And both places the Choter is mentioned, the entire chapter is devoted to what God will do through him. And so just as we have considered and will reconsider Yahowah 11, which is where I first came to encounter the Choter, right after I translated Yahowah 11 for the first time, I went and looked at the other place that it had been mentioned. It was in this 14th mashal, and we began to have a fuller appreciation, but not to near the extent that we can appreciate what Dode wrote now. And why he wrote it, because for 3,000 years since he has predicted that he would serve as the Pesach El, that he would fulfill Matzah and Bakurim in 33 CE in year 4000 Yah, even telling us 1,000 years before he endured it that he would be crucified, that he would be whipped by the Romans, he would be crucified by them. He told us the exact day that this would happen, 700 years in advance, and 1,000 years in advance, 700 before crucifixion even existed as a form of punishment. He described it vividly, exactly how he would be nailed and how it would kill his physical body. And then he explained how he would take our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there. Things that were also elaborated on by Yahowah, Isaiah, 300 years later. So the first time that anyone has come to appreciate the fact that Dode predicted his own crucifixion in fulfilling Pesach, Passover, in first person, 1,000 years before he endured this torment, should have been obvious. But nevertheless, no one had identified it until I did. And now I'm reintroducing, not only I was named to his people, but Dode as the Messiah, the Son of God, and Savior, as well as returning King to Yisrael and Yehudim. And because this is such a big deal to Dode and to Yahowah, his father, they have devoted many hundreds of prophecies to the role that I would play and bringing this to your attention. So as we rejoin, what I had shared at the conclusion of our last program a couple of days ago was that participating in social media to advance this message to God's people was something I did for the first time this year. Previously, I had never even posted a single word, not one word, not on Facebook, not on X, not on Twitter, not on YouTube, nowhere. And so this was the first time that I began to use it. I was asked by YAHOWAH to do so. And I will tell you that the experience on Facebook has been lovely. Yeah, it's just a marvelous place for community. The experience on X has been horrific. And Facebook, we'll have to figure out somehow to be better at their algorithms. But I do like the fact that everything that we have recorded for you is all there. We just need to do a better job of promoting it, which is something we'll attend to before long now that we have such tremendous content available. One of the things that you do very quickly ascertain when you engage in social media, particularly on X, is really the retardation of humanity. Between religion and politics and conspiracy, humankind is in a very, very bad way. We've always known that we have no chance of communicating effectively to those who are overtly religious, overtly political, overtly conspiratorial, nor anyone who is not sophisticated enough in their ability to read and to think, to process information intellectually so that they can think their way to God, because that is the only way to know him. This notion that all you have to do is believe is nonsense. You either know or you don't know. God has no use for beliefs, and nor should you. So you do have to do a considerable amount of investing your time to be observant of the testimony YAHOWAH has prepared. Now, fortunately, I've made that a lot easier for you with these amplified translations from the oldest extant resources and the explanations that I've provided of them, and making the connections so that you can go from knowing to understanding, but you do have to invest the time. It's more than just listening to these programs. So as we continue, Dode, the Savior, our King, wrote, the allotment of the naive and easily deceived is a fool's folly. And it is both petulant and cantankerous. However, the prudent and discerning, the sensible and the disciplined, Arun, the perceptive and judicious, they are surrounded by Kathar, knowledge and understanding, Dayath. YAHOWAH is, when he inspires someone to write as he did, Dode, you can tell that God is not impressed by stupid. And I know that it just is not comfortable for a lot of people to recognize that the only way that stupid is going to be part of the covenant is for that person to have such a capacity to appreciate the father-son, father-daughter relationship that YAHOWAH is trying to achieve, and that they have a parent that is so generous in their time that that parent models it and explains it in a way that the child can grasp hold of and capitalize upon. And I've seen it happen with young people because of the way that parents or grandparents have modeled the nature of the covenant. But for the most part, for those who are among the average tweeting away on X, this is not for them. The covenant is not for them. Faith is for them. Politics is for them. But not a relationship with YAHOWAH. One would think that the contrast between dumb as a stone and vibrant as a Chakmah individual would be readily apparent, but apparently to differentiate between them requires a level of intelligence no longer apparent in today's youth. As a result, we must chuckle and show our chagrin among ourselves, and we may be tossing in many times pearls before swine, but there is an occasional fine jeweler in attendance that can appreciate the many facets of the diamonds that we are shaping for them. Well, this next statement must be prophetic for another day because humility isn't readily apparent, but it is reassuring that Father and Son perceive those of us who are striving on their behalf as, well, productive and pleasing. Dode would write, "Those who are wrong are humbled. They're weakened, bowing down in submission. When approaching the presence of those who are prosperous and productive, pleasing and agreeable, and those who are guilty and criminally unethical, at the gates of the upright, correct, and guiltless are locked out." So we have here in Proverbs 14:19 a statement where we're contrasting right and wrong. And it is interesting here with so many people, particularly Muslims and Orthodox Christians, constantly bowing down. They just think that bowing down in prayer is the best thing you could possibly do. And, I just constantly want to remind people that a God who would tell an inferior being to bow down and worship him is a narcissist and not worth knowing. It is revolting that people would project that kind of behavior on God. God never asks anyone to bow down to him. He is disgusted when we do. He tells us to stand up if it is something that if we are someone he wants to talk to. And he does not want to be worshipped. He wants to be known and respected, listened to and responded to, but definitely not worshipped. You would never bow down to or have worship in a mother-daughter, father-son relationship, and so God doesn't want it either. But those who are wrong, well, they are going to bow down, and they will be humbled when approaching the presence of those who are prosperous, productive, pleasing, and agreeable. This is another use of tob. Tob does mean good, but it means a lot more than just good. And in this case, Dode is speaking of those who are productive, those who are pleasing, those who are agreeable to God. And those who are guilty and criminally unethical, they're going to be on the other side of those gates, looking in at the upright, correct, the innocent, and the guilty, and the guiltless. It is Sadak. Sadak is really the most important word that we can address, that we can appreciate really when we're trying to develop a relationship with Yahowah. Yahowah constantly said that David was right. That's Sadak, correct, vindicated. And we must be too. The path to Yahowah, to developing a relationship with him, is all based upon Sadak, being right about God. So Yahowah clearly has gatekeepers such that the entrance to his heavenly abode is restricted to those of his choosing. And it appears that many of those who felt assured of their place in line are going to remain on the outside looking in as a result of their unethical behavior. And it turns out God expects consistency and loyalty, and he isn't interested in those who would work against his interest, even if they contributed previously, no matter what they may have achieved. One of the great examples here is Miriam, which is the example that Yahowah asked me to consider. At Miriam, at her peak performance, she was among a half a dozen women who served as prophets. she led what's called the Song of the Women's Response at the Song of the Sea. And because she was leading the women's response at the Song of the Sea, which is a song that the children of Israel sung to Yahowah upon crossing the Gulf of Aqaba of the Red Sea. That was her best moment. And so she had to, at that point, have a relationship with Yahowah. And you would say, well, if you have a relationship with Yahowah, you're good to go. Well, no. Because she got a little full of herself. Not a little, a lot. She attacked Moshe's wife when she had no business doing so. And then she used that as an excuse to say, well, I too speak for God. She had brought Aaron with her, who was a bit of a scallywag. And Aaron just sat there with his finger in his nose. He's just such a useless human being. And he didn't say squat. But he was there to capitalize, but we too speak for God, standing by Miriam, who was Moshe's sister. We talked a lot about fractured families. They're evident throughout the Torah and the prophets. And God absolutely put her in her place. So here's a woman who had at one moment been right there among the most respected women in her relationship and productivity with God, contributing in a mighty and effective way. And then she got a little full of herself, a lot full of herself, and thought she could go off on her own and she too could speak for God. And God said to her, even if your father had spit in your face, I wouldn't overlook this. And he plagued her with leprosy. And then went on and on about how horrible leprosy is. And then he ostracized her from the community. And even when she was allowed back into the encampment in Devarim, I believe it's the 24th chapter, she is used as the example of divorce. When you're used as the example of divorce with the children of Israel in the Torah, you're done. So, yes, indeed. If you're going to be covenant, you need to act it. This is an ongoing responsibility. We are all called to advance Yahowah's business. We're part of the covenant family, and families work together, and they stay together. And should you choose to go off with another group and work against those that Yahowah has chosen, in the case of Moshe, in the case now with his Choter, now consider yourself divorced. Yahowah only has one set of instructions, and he doesn't change. And so this applies to people who know whom I'm speaking of. So God does expect consistency. He expects loyalty, and he isn't interested in those who are neither. God loves some, of course, and he abhors others. That's another thing that people don't get through their head. God doesn't love everybody. In fact, he hates more people than he loves by I'd say certainly 1,000 to 1. For the most part, God just doesn't know most people, has no interest in them at all, doesn't love them, doesn't hate them. But the number of people God loves to the people he hates is probably 1,000 to 1. And those that he loves versus either hates or ignores is over 1,000,000 to 1. Now, of course, it is his prerogative. And in this case, Dode is being more elusive than Yahowah is in other places, because he's speaking for God. It's not God speaking for himself in this case. But Dode is being also somewhat inclusive, recognizing that the loudest and the rudest of these who joined the resident psychopath, in my case, in the rebellion, as our, the man who represents Aaron in the myth was our webmaster, who seems to have dug quite a hole for himself based upon this statement. And while our Messiah quickly transitions to the team pursuing his interests and commends them, it has become rather obvious that Dode took this rebellion against the one heralding his return to center stage among his people as our Savior much harder than did his Bashar. This, I think, is understandable, although somewhat surprising, in the sense that he had 3,000 years to stew over it. While in the midst of the fray, it was a frustrating few days that concluded enormously better than they began. And while we have been too busy trying to accomplish the mission to be annoyed by those who tried to stand in our way, Dowd has given it his best shot. He recognizes that Yahowah established the Choter for the express purpose of reintroducing Dowd to his people as their Messiah, Son of God, and King, and that he is the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim in 33 CE, becoming our Savior. And that is so essential to Dowd's return as King of the universe that without it, the family reunion doesn't happen. And therefore, he is not going to tolerate anyone getting in our way. Also, furthermore, Gam, by his loud and roaring associate, the impoverished and needy are abhorred and slighted, but the enormously enriched and supremely honorable are loved and enjoy a close personal relationship. It is interesting that the psychopath, and I use that term clinically because this woman was clinically diagnosed as a psychopath. She never, well, she wrote a horrendous letter. I've read it with one of these programs. But after writing her horrendous letter, she never spoke again. She went out and sent off her little monkeys, like, the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch, and the Wizard of Oz with those flying monkeys. She sent her flying monkeys out. And the most vociferous of them, the most cruel of them, the most vicious of them, the most destructive of them was a fellow that had previously served as a webmaster. And he is the Aaron in the Miriam and Aaron confrontation against Moshe as the one who speaks for God. And so in this case, we're being told that the loudest one is exceedingly impoverished and needy. He is abhorred and will be slighted by God. It was a really, really dumb call. Matter of fact, for a person that can write code, it was, everything he said was completely irrational. And that's not a good thing when you're writing taking a position where you're going to build a website for someone who is misleading people in a mother goddess cult and working against the person that God has chosen. That is an exceedingly irrational position to be in. And nonetheless, he doubled and tripled down. But by the other side, Dowd is making it quite clear that there are those who are enormously enriched and supremely honored. They're loved, and they enjoy close personal relationships, both with Dowd and with his father. So, sure, great deal at stake with the restoration of Yahowah's name. And there is a lot to accomplish with the familiarization that Dowd is the Messiah and Son of God, who fulfilled Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children, who will return on the day of reconciliations. 3,000 years have come and gone without any progress, and only, 30 remained when we began. So any disruption, no matter how readily resolved with far better people, must have appeared like the sky was falling to Dowd. And who could blame him? He had volunteered to fulfill the most difficult and excruciating mission in human history. He convinced God that he was the right man for this job. He witnessed his sacrifice and he wrote about it. And he did exactly as he had promised. And yet, there wasn't anyone who recognized what he had done. And in the place of Dowd, who acknowledged he was going to do all of this in first person, both Judaism and Christianity foisted false messiahs on believers, leading them further and further from the truth, so that when you share the truth, it is essentially unrecognizable to them. I just think that's fascinating. So we're having a little orange soda and iced tea, huh, Wookie? Well, make yourself right at home. Wookie has had a very, very difficult afternoon, I'll have to tell you. I mean, here he is, handsome as ever. But we had thunderstorms all day here, and Wookie does not like it when he thinks God is angry. And so it was a tough day. It was a tough day on the Wook. So we're going to let him have some orange soda and iced tea. We won't tell him it'll stunt his growth. But, here we are. For Dowd, I'm sure that when this glitch happened, it must have looked like the sky is falling. We had made such progress, and just as it was about to happen that we were going to open up the floodgates of sharing, so that his people would have such great access to the truth and the way that they most want to hear it, speaking directly to them, looking at them, so they check out the expressions, the gestures, the tone, the inflection, and all the words are also written. So you can go look them up and verify all of this for yourself. This is not just a talking head video where there's no way for you to validate anything, because everything I'm sharing with you is actually published right on, in this case, because it's a book that I haven't yet released for publication, we published everything on Facebook. The entire chapter that I'm sharing with you, every word. Now, not the ones that I'm ad-libbing, obviously, but all the text is there for you to examine it and validate it, scrutinize it. The more you know, the better off you are. So it is a shame that Dowd had sacrificed so much, that he had written about precisely what he would do, including telling us that he would allow himself to be crucified to fulfill Passover 1,000 years before he did so. And yet no one noticed. How's that possible? But nonetheless, that is what occurred. And surprisingly, I was the first to recognize it. And I think it's the single greatest discovery in human history. And for Dowd, it is everything, because his reputation is restored. It's now possible to have a productive Shabuah harvest. It's now possible to have a Teruah ingathering. It's possible for there to be the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah and the preparation for the adulterous woman that is Yisrael to be betrothed to their returning king as he returns on Yom Kippurim with Yahowah. It's now possible because of what we're doing. And so Dowd is obviously ecstatic. He did this for our benefit and for the benefit of his reputation, so that he could effectively govern us everywhere forevermore. And we're giving that back to him. It's his due. So when this was looking like, wow, we are right there on the cusp of breaking through, and the publisher, webmaster, and social media maven bolted with a cadre of followers, it must look bleak, considering there was so little time remaining to achieve the desired result. So Dowd, who is a very good man, was naturally protective of his most important subordinate, the lesser luminary, whose light must reflect the king, for the king to reign. Despising and deriding boots, showing contempt for and disrespecting. The approach of his vociferous friend and companion leads astray. But the chanan, the one who is generous and fortuitous, to the responsive, he is a blessing, showing the way to receive the benefits of the relationship he enjoys so much. Oh, here we have Dowd again making the contrast. He sees the world in black and white. And that doesn't mean that there's lots of gray. It's just that the gray is of no interest to him. And the gray is of no interest to Yahowah. That was the magnificence of learning, as I did so long ago, that the vast preponderance of human souls don't go to heaven or hell. They simply dissolve into nothingness at the end of their mortal life. There is no reward. There is no punishment. You're given free will. You're given the opportunity. And when it's over, it's over. And so that's the great gray area where God doesn't know those individuals. They don't know him. They were either religious or political, but they were those who were who believed, as opposed to those who promoted what was wrong. And therefore, it is at the edges that both Yahowah and Dowd pay attention. And at these extremes, you have on one side those who know and love Yahowah, those who recognize who Dowd is. They respond to Yahowah's name. They understand the terms and conditions of the covenant. They attend the 7 Moed Mikre and understand the relationship between the Moed Mikre and the Bereth covenant. And they are part of God's family. They are the most important people to God. On the other end, you have people like rabbis and popes and priests and leading politicians and generals and dictators and the like. And those are the ones who are abusing God's people, or they are misleading people. So, if you're part of modern progressive academia and you're slandering Jews, dehumanizing them, calling for genocide against Israel, you're in a whole world of trouble. You're in that group over here. And if you are a Muslim and you are a good one and you are looking forward to being able to kill Jews or rape them or plunder them or torture or terrorize them, well, then you're in this group over here too. If you've been a Roman Catholic for 1800 years, the Roman Catholics subjugated and persecuted Jews. There's going to be accountability for that. So there is the group that are going, their soul is going to suffer the retribution, the responsibility that they've earned of going into the place of separation, while there will be those who enter Shamaim and have an eternal relationship with Yahowah, and then the gray area in the middle that they don't speak of. So here, like so many other places, we have the two extremes that Dowd is focusing on, despising and deriding the approach to his vociferous friend and companion leads astray. He's speaking now of the enabler of the vicious, psychotic woman who started the mother goddess cult. By contrast, Dowd views that what we are doing is as chanan, generous and fortuitous, as really as what he did. Because while he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, which is exceedingly generous for us, it doesn't matter if we don't do our job and let you know what he did so you can capitalize upon it. So collectively, we are being fortuitous and generous together. We are being compassionate and merciful together. And one of the things, too, you ought to keep in mind that just because Yahowah is the one who makes all of this possible, but Yahowah likes working through people. And Yahowah recognizes that the best way to get the most out of those he works through is to share credit. If you read the Quran, Allah takes credit for everything, shares credit with no one. And Yahowah is exactly the opposite. He is constantly sharing credit. And Does he give more credit to people like Dode and myself and Moshe than we deserve? Absolutely. But it's his style. He's very comfortable with who he is. He doesn't need credit. He wants us certainly to appreciate him and know what he has done. But Yahweh likes to share credit. And Dode is a man after Yahweh's heart, which means he also likes to share credit. So if you read that he thinks we're like him and being generous with his people, now you understand why. He goes on to say that he is also a blessing, showing the way to receive the benefits of the relationship that he enjoys. This is word pictures, Proverbs 14:21. There is an ongoing battle here that Dode is presenting between right and wrong. But the verdict is in. We prevail. Dode will reign again. The family will be restored, and the earth is going to be repaired. The Son of God will finally be appreciated for all that he has done. And he's the one who made all of this possible. However, he isn't going to forget, nor will he forgive those who were intent on raining on his parade. After all, Dode knows that if we don't prevail, he doesn't either. And that being true, God would be horribly disappointed. And we're not going to let that happen. Do they not go astray and wander away? Those who plot, who plan, and who devise that which is misleading, troublesome, and wrong. And loyal love, unfailing kindness, and genuine affection, honesty, integrity, and reliability is the written work of the productive and beneficial, the proper and prosperous. It's lovely, isn't it? So the contrast again, and you have a number of options on this contrast. Dode could be speaking of the great breadth of those who are religious, all of Judaism, all of Christianity, all of Islam, for example. Doesn't much care about Hinduism because it doesn't have much influence on his people. He only speaks of politics when it affects his people, so he would have a lot to say and a lot to disdain about progressives. And God is openly critical of the conspiratorial. But when we read this, we can say he is being specific of those who almost, well, I don't know if they almost, but they certainly made an attempt to derail the Choter's agenda. And Dode, having everything writing on it, wrote his chapter on the Choter to defend the Choter and to expose and condemn those who spoke out against him. So that's one way of looking at it. The other is to perceive those who have gone astray and wandered away, those who have planned, devised, and plotted that which is misleading, troublesome, and wrong, as the entirety of the religious community and the political community that have been among those who have conceived false messiahs, all of which were created through identity theft by robbing Dode of his accomplishments, his accolades, his achievements, his titles. Personally, I think it is more of the latter than the former, but I think they're both evident. And they're really very similar. The alternative, of course, is that Dode recognizes that just as he is never shown to be a great orator, he's shown to be a great singer. But there isn't a rallying speech where you hear Dode having a recorded moment where what he has to say just resonates through your soul. Moshe had many of those in Devarim. And there are those throughout the portrait of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. But what Dode was great with is the written word. It's something we shared. I much prefer the written word. I've relished it. Since I was a kid and writing reports, I've always loved the written word. I just think it is such a magnificent tool. And so Dode says there's great integrity. There's great reliability. There is honesty and goodness in the written word. It is productive. It is beneficial. It is proper. And that's why you see these books behind me. A whole library of books that are all written based upon deriving a more accurate translation of the text in an amplified fashion, giving you the ability to validate those words for yourself and verify that the translation is accurate, and then writing a commentary on them so you would be more fully appraised as to what was being said and the context it was being conveyed in. And then this ability to bring it all together so you would see other things that are related and see how the whole picture comes together, so that you go from faith to knowing, and then from knowing to understanding, and ultimately into a relationship with Yahowah. And that is the purpose of the written word. And today, I don't want to poo-poo the spoken word, because while I have always preferred, as has Yahowah, as has Dode, the written word over the spoken word for many, many years, something has changed just in the last 5 years. And over the last 5 years, the spoken word is actually more effective and more powerful, more enduring than the written word. I don't think the spoken word by itself is as reliable. I don't think it's as honest. I don't think it is as overall easily verifiable, I should say. Because the written word is something that you can, particularly with search engines today in your browser, you can take anything that I say, take the word or take a concept, and you can do a Google search on it and validate it. That isn't true with the spoken word. So there is an aspect of the written word that has value, and plus the written word is more thoughtful. You have the time to tune a phrase that you don't have when you're speaking as I am now. But then there's an aspect today of the spoken word that is more effective, and that it is, I think, more genuine. You can tell when I'm looking at you and speaking directly to you that I know what I'm talking about, that this is literally part of me that is coming forth to enlighten you about who Yahowah is and who Dode is and what they're offering. There is a sense of integrity too, and honesty, benefit that comes through the tone of this message, its cadence. Just the fact that you're able to see the person who is speaking to you, and we can develop a bond that really isn't possible just as ink stains the page. So I think there is certainly now considerable merit to the spoken word. Plus, now with the cloud and with the great retention that there is of everything that is on the internet, the spoken word has every bit of endurance. Now, that doesn't mean that Yahowah could have done it any different, because going through the ages, it was essential for him to write everything down, which is what he did. Those who are wrong have, of course, plagued mankind. They have demeaned God's people. They have deprived millions and billions of their souls. and they have pilfered the achievements and accolades of our rightful Messiah. They have robbed him and given his due to the likes of Bar Kokhba and Jesus. Of particular shame are the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, of course, and Islam, that have thrived on malfeasance, and they have all misrepresented messianic claims. But the scoundrels are many and include Romans and Greeks, Europeans and Americans, progressives and Muslims. And quite frankly, the naysayers and destroyers come within a hair's breadth of prevailing in the end. That is, if you call destruction of the planet, of elimination of life and liberty, a worthy achievement, then, well, they come awfully close. Many will plot. Many will go astray. Those who mislead will outnumber those who are properly shepherded by 1,000,000 to 1. But ultimately, love prevails. Compassion wins. Integrity counts. The truth finds its mark. It would all be written in a book. Well, 35, 6, 7, 8 of them. His Choter would be productive and the results would be beneficial. I give you a range of books because, well, I've never, I have put in the company Tea with Terrorists and Prophet of Doom online. None of the three now are on the bookshelf of YAHOWAH.com. And I have shared large parts of Coming Home 4, and it is part of that assortment as well, but not yet on the bookshelf. So I think there's 34 books on the bookshelf and 4 more that have been written. So none of this is particularly easy. In every challenge, difficult task, and labor, there is, however, an advantageous benefit. But the lip sync words surely impoverish because they lack what is vital. Whoa, mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 14:23. Yeah, Dode had a lot of time, as has Yahowah, to hear the platitudes of the religious and political. Somebody dies, they say, may their memory be a blessing. No, their memory is not a blessing. They're dead. And in most cases, they're dead because the living didn't do what they should have done. All of those who were killed on 10/7 and Israel are abducted. Well, it is Muslims who did them in. It is Israel's fault for not properly assessing Islam, thinking that they could live and be free with Muslims around them. Even now, they go and lash out at Hamas, not knowing that Hamas is simply a symptom, and therefore you can't win a war against Islam by attacking a symptom of the religion. Jews are in their fix now because they have erased Yahowah's name, because they have no knowledge of their Messiah and fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. They don't even know how to celebrate Pesach correctly. They ignore Matzah and Bakodim. And they have no idea when the Shabuah harvest is occurring, or who will make the end gathering, or when Towrah will be fulfilled. They don't even know what Towrah is because they've changed it to Rosh Hashanah, and they've completely denigrated Yom Kippur, meaning a day of afflictions as opposed to the day of reconciliations. So, to a large degree, if you're an Israeli, you're in this fix because you just haven't been circumspect. You haven't been prudent. You haven't thought it all through. You haven't been willing to break free of those who have lied to you, your politicians, and your rabbis for all of these years. And you need to do so if you're going to experience a different outcome. And I will tell you that while that is not easy, it takes time, and there is some initial consternation in separating yourself from those who are so very, very harmful to you. In the end, it is all liberty. it is all emancipation. It is all enhancement and empowerment. There is, by the time that you are just beginning your journey with Yahweh, you find that everything he is asking from us and offering to us is for our benefit, and that you lose nothing that has any value. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It still takes time. It is a challenge, and it is through overcoming challenges that benefits are derived. And that's part of what Yahweh wanted to accomplish with his Choter, is he would invest the time to learn, to translate, to put the various aspects of what God was saying together to understand, and then to share, and then frame the entire picture so you could see it from beginning to end. Reveal all of the beautiful facets of this jewel that God is offering us. And that's so different than those who walk up to a stone wall and recite synced words. They're just impoverished because it has as much value as those words have to that wall. Well, this has been my mantra from long before I met Yahowah or came to know Dode. I think, and I am certain, that both Dode and Yahowah agree. Character is forged in adversity. The more difficult the challenge, the more strenuous the labor, the more formidable the obstacles, the more our confidence and resolve grow when we overcome. There are many benefits associated with toil. Work is valued and valuable. And right now, Wookie woke up from his nap. He is guarding a piece of chicken, chicken strip that he has here, and he realized that Asher could have stolen that chicken strip while I was napping, but I'm dog on duty now. All right, Wook, you go to him. So, work is valued by me, by my king, by his father. It is valuable. If you don't like work, and that really is a problem today, because if you don't like work, you're not going to like God. Because one of the things that is so evident in watching today's young people is they're just not prepared to work. They're not educated so that they know how to work. They can't think it through. They could no more run a business, manage a business, work in a business than man on the moon. They're self-indulgent, self-entitled, and yet their processor is broken. They have no ethics. There's zero reason to pay any of them to do anything. And work ethic is gone. And without work, nothing of value is achieved. So by comparison, those who give lip service to what I've discovered, as I've seen many do, and well, what they share is just an impoverished version. They lack the commitment, personal involvement, and resulting understanding that you derive when you come to own the material because you have invested the energy into it. Now, in my case, I've invested 24 years developing thousands of amplified translations. Well, my rival for attention, not much of a rival, so it's hard to even say it like that. But from Dode's point of view, it was true for the moment. She's yet to compose one. And when they do go off and try to do one, they copy my style and they do a horrible job, and they've got no ability whatsoever to make sense of it all. And so every time they go off into their own, they come up with the most harebrained schemes that it's even hard to imagine. Well, I'm just here to tell you that learning is a process. We simply don't know until we know. And once we know, we're finally in a position to understand. But even then, it takes lots of Chakmah, Yada, and Bien. You need to be able to process the information you come to know such that you make the connections to understand. And without the effort, the lip-synced words lack something vital to our success. So while Dode is my king, and it is his throne and responsibility, well, according to him, and I can't even imagine wearing one for a second. It's just not my style. But he wants to attribute one with me as a junior helper person. Well, in my case, at least mine's going to be comprised of Chakmah, of words wielded wisely, and I'll be comfortable with that. But in this regard, it will be shared among all of those who have embraced Team Yah. And if he is affording a crown of Chakmah that can be shared among all of those who are participating in conveying Yahweh's testimony to his people at this critical time. And there are just some absolutely wonderful people who are devoted to this. I mean, I can't post anything and it won't even stay there 10 minutes before 5, 10, 15, 20 people have commented, shared, reposted, liked, because we're committed to getting Israel's attention. We're committed to doing what our Father wants. And so if there is a crown of wisdom that we can all share, then I'm good with that. And this will be the last passage that we will share in this program. It says, the crown of the discerning, intelligent, and wise, the Chakmah, is their enrichment. It's an abundance of wealth for them. By contrast, the foolish of the insolent and rebellious, it's the idiotic and imperious. So I would highly recommend knowing. And beyond knowing, understanding. And ultimately, the way we get there is through disciplined thinking. And for our King, who is the wearer of the great crown, he says that he is offering a crown for us of Chakmah. And it is our enrichment. And it is so vastly superior to foolishness, to being insolent, to being rebellious, to being idiotic, because it shows spiritual immaturity. Mashal word pictures, Proverbs 14:24. We'll pick up in episode 8 of Chakmah, Choter, tomorrow with this ongoing presentation. I hope you enjoyed our new library studio, as we have tried to make it a little more attractive, visually appealing, and enlightened for these programs. Thank you for listening.